SPJIMR Center for Wisdom in Leadership presents its podcast series, Sapience. It is about the practical aspects of a wisdom-based approach on leadership, various global and societal issues.
Hello, welcome to Sapience, a special podcast series brought to you by SPJIMR Center for Wisdom and Leadership. I am Surya Tahora, Executive Director of CWIL, and today, for the 10th episode, I will be in conversation with Christian Mayhofer. Christian is a co-founder of Conscious Consulting Group and blending 30 years of experience as a psychotherapist, a social worker, and a Zen monk with expertise in transformation and leadership. So welcome, Christian, to this conversation we'll have on Sapience. So it's really a pleasure, really, to tell you I'm so impatient to have this conversation with you because you have a fascinating profile and life story and, of course, what you are doing now, which is in the field of, let's say, conscious or wisdom or spiritual, let's say, field, is like really very interesting. So let's look more into that. So welcome again. And I would like to start with one very simple question, Christian. As we talked offline, I think there is a very deep connection between what the person is, right? And how, let's say, life unfolds and how also, of course, let's say life takes some turns, right? And so I was very curious to hear from you, what were some of these key moments in your life which drove you to who you are today and like heading this conscious consulting, let's say, company?
Thank you very much, Surya. The pleasure's on my side fully, especially after our several conversations now we had. It's like a circle is closing again, especially since you are sitting now in Mumbai.
Yes.
India, where actually a very relevant part of my journey began. And I always refer to India as kind of my spiritual mother. It's my source. So, but actually, what you said, this life path, this life journey actually only unfolds, obviously, when you look back, because in the midst of it, it's like walking the uncharted territory. It's like, and as Julia, my wife, often says, if you feel comfortable with the way ahead, you probably are on somebody else's path. So, and if the journey of our life is the unfolding of our life, with utmost capacity, then it's by definition a walk in the dark, a walk in the fog, a walk in the unknown or into the unknown.
Yeah, absolutely.
So my journey began in the early 60s of last century in rural Austria, which was what I can see now, looking back, a very spiritual place at that time.
Okay.
Based in Christianity, in the Catholic form of that, and especially at my home, where my mom being a highly spiritual person.
Okay.
Which I regarded very early as A, fascinating, and B, suffocating. You know, the religious aspect of it was suffocating to me in this very narrow, tiny village. And this also, and I can recall it a day, and I must have been 4 years old, when there was this one sentence in my mind which said, I have to get out of here.
Amazing. Yeah.
And out always meant city and meant the world, which was at that time for the community I was part of not very common, because people more or less stayed where they were born into. But this was kind of my North Star through school until my final degrees, which allowed me to set off into the world. And actually, after first short gig in the United States, I found my way to India, to Asia, when I was a very young man, about 20, 21 years old, in late
Also,
70s.
Christian, can I interrupt you here? Because see, on the when you look at your biodata and so on, you see Christian studied sociology in Leeds and then philosophy in Salzburg and so on. So, is it after your study that all this Indian call came, or what happened exactly?
It was in the midst of it.
Yeah.
Between, I took breaks. At that time, it was still possible at our universities to vanish for half a year.
Okay.
And so I studied social work, sociology, and philosophy, which I didn't finish, but it was always my real core, I would say, was philosophy, but not in this university kind of take, but the interest in the spiritual domain of mankind. I always was interested in that. This was, and in the early teens, it was phrased or embedded in a religious form of Catholicism.
Yeah.
Which very soon didn't cover, didn't feel as my home turf anymore, due to the religious interpretation of the time, I suppose. But what I didn't know then, but now I can see it, I was the idea of, or the taste and the spiritual qualities of what it means to be a human being, to be alive, this ungraspable dimension of where there is no technological or intellectual explanation to it, this myth part of life, which was then still very part of our society, but to the utmost overwhelmed when I touched ground in Asia, in India specifically. This was for me in the beginning, the first 3 weeks were an overkill. It was just an overkill. It was just too much. It was like and India 40, 50 years back was a different India than today, of course.
Yeah.
But what I was kind of absolutely not prepared for the dimensions of which I was confronted with, also in terms of the first layer, the obvious layer of different culture, different sounds, different tastes, different smells, different everything, and also the amount of everything at the same time, seemingly contradictory to at least to my conceptual patterns of the world, because Europe and Austria was a very kind of regulated small place. Not so densely inhabited as India was slightly, and then all of a sudden, it was a shock. The first 3 weeks were a shock to me. And
so it's interesting, Christian, because there is a French sociologist he has a book where he's describing the encounter with India. By many people who are like foreign to India, and the first time they come, so either they are either they're totally enamored and they are like immediately like merging and flowing into the whole new setup that they're discovering, or there is a violent reaction. And they cannot, let's say, cope with what they see. So I would like to ask you, Christian, so did you meet somebody, let's say a teacher of any spiritual tradition? Was it Buddhist or Zen? Because in your, I was looking at your LinkedIn page and there was written Zen monk. So this Zen, let's say, orientation that you like to call yourself, was it like originated in India at that time, or was it later?
At the end, it was. It took still 20 years to find my lineage and my scent in the late 90s. The beginning was absolutely there. So it was first India, then Nepal, in Hindu overwhelming practice. And I recall that Swami, that I met on the street the other day in Mumbai, and he just grabbed my hand, and he was, I don't know, 100 years older than me at the time, and he white beard, and all this strength, and he said, "Come with me," and I was, "Oh, why? What? Is this dangerous or what?" But then I overcame that, and I followed him, and we were just walking for 3 or 4 days north of Mumbai into the forest, where now I think Mumbai's already arrived, but this was jungle at that time, just to walk to one temple.
Wow.
Just to go to one temple, celebrate there, do a puja, I don't know, for 2 hours, and then walk back, and a week was gone, and it just didn't make sense in the European mind. It was, you go to church, it takes 20 minutes, a 1 hour church, and then go back. And everything was so different. But what kind of hooked was this self-esteem, this natural expression of this is the way it is. Just follow me into the unknown.
Wow.
And this was beautiful to me to see. And over time, the first 3 weeks were a challenge. And if I would have got a ticket back, an airplane ticket back, I would have taken that. But the thing was, back then, you didn't have every day a flight, and all the flights booked. So my earliest date back was 6 weeks later. But 3 weeks on that route, it was having arrived at home, kind of. It was home turf, sound to me. So I'm grateful until today for not having a flight back home. And then Nepal was all of a sudden the blend of Hinduism and Buddhism came in. And Buddhism was kind of partly familiar to me due to literature and curiosity and actually this is when my Tibetan lineage practice began.
Okay.
In Kathmandu and Bhaktapur, especially when I was staying there for about half a year in Bhaktapur.
Okay.
And I got friend with the prince, the son of the ruler of Bhaktapur, and he introduced me to this realm of completely new and ancient wisdom, actually.
Absolutely.
So this was amazing. And then a quick step into Tibet, which was forbidden territory, of course, and still I was curious and young and crossed the lines, the red lines even, and endangered myself and others by doing so, but I made it safely back. And then my European, that practice followed me back to Europe.
So that is interesting, Christian, because at that time you were quite young. So were you already you are not in the line of consulting organization?
No. I was at the end of my studies of the work in psychotherapy, actually. And but then I started my first job actually in a rehab center, in a clinic for drug addiction.
Okay.
At 82 or 83, and working as a psychotherapist. And a year later, by chance, I got appointed to become director of that hospital.
Okay.
At a young age. And this was a very special moment in time, and you might recall that time because it was the mid-80s when AIDS all of a sudden.
Correct. I was doing my internship at that time in Paris in a hospital, and they were the first patient. I was a biologist at that time, and so the first patient were coming with AIDS, and so I know what you're referring to.
So you know what I'm talking about, because this was we had this double plague, actually, drug misuse and AIDS, and in a very conservative society as Austria was, and at that time this was hell. This was hell for the target groups, because they all of a sudden this was like the black plague of the time.
Absolutely, and we were on the medical side. We were like so afraid of even going and see and consulting and looking at the condition of the patients, of them, of these humans.
I had 25 or 30 colleagues all of them older than me. I was their boss. And we did the infection path was completely unclear at that time. How it was.
True.
And so we did testings every week with the old famous Western blot test, which didn't prove a thing. But all of a sudden you had your patients, young kids mostly, between 60 and 25 or 30, and your colleagues, all of them afraid.
Yeah.
And several of them tested positive, and then you have this horror ongoing of now I'm a mother of 5 and a social worker, and now I'm positive and so on. And all that in the midst of a building storm, because in society this was a storm raging across the country through culture. And it was, of course, it actually was not only drugs, it was gay, homosexuality.
Yeah.
This was a terrible blend of situations. And in that role as head of and director of the clinic, you automatically by nature step into this kind of father kind of role, leader, internally covering, having kids physically dying in my hands, in my arms, and not knowing, nothing to do, and to protect them to shield them from the outside, and to take a political voice in that society as a young man. Wow. So this was now looking back, I don't know how I handled that. It was, but I was in that tunnel, this was a really tunnel.
So when you say that, Christian, in the tunnel, it means that your personal, let's say, Buddhist or whatever inspired practices were on one side, and this psychological work with this patient and so on was another side, or there was already a connection between the two?
I think it was the beginning of the connection, because what I all of a sudden could see is the beauty of the teaching.
Yeah.
And, there's on one hand, when you start meeting the teacher or the teachings, this is a kind of conceptual form as well. But in that in the physically manifested place of that clinic, all the suffering, you had all that what the Buddha was talking about.
Right. Yeah.
And then the outer world hammering on the door.
Yeah.
In their fear, in their anxiety, in their rage, in their finger pointing. The teaching was all of a sudden unfolded in an instant. It was all there. So, and it was clear. This was the proof of concept for me.
Wow.
And actually, I think from that moment on, it became unknowingly the guiding principle of my life. Because take out AIDS, take out drugs, take out whatever, what remains is the core ingredients. It's still the same. Look at the world today, look at everything. It's what are the key reasons of suffering, as the Buddhas called them. And it's greed, it's hate, it's delusion, and it's the illusion of a separate self. I'm separate from the world.
Yeah, exactly. And I can play and manipulate everything to my advantage. Yeah. So then let me ask you one thing now, because see, this is interesting. This beginning of intersection and merging this realization, but then how did that turn to you creating and founding this conscious consulting group, right? Yeah. And this practice towards organization, because it has nothing to do, it seems, in surface.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was trained as a psychotherapist in family therapy and system thinking. So this background. So there was the idea of there is no separate self. There is on a technical, psychological level. Correct. Everyone is embedded into a larger network of energies and fields and relationships.
Right.
And therefore, you cannot only look at the single individual who pops up as sick or as weak,
Yeah, independently from its whole context and relationship and all moving and changing. Absolutely.
What happened when I was 28 then? This was, I think, one of my core. A major breakdown happened. I left the clinic because today you would call it burnout. I was just done. It was just, and I knew if I wouldn't leave, I would die. This was a deep knowing without any specific hint, but I knew I had to leave. I was done. I did what I could, and I'm empty. So I left, and 3 months later, I hit the wall full speed. In terms of, I was 28, 29. I was a young man in his best age, and everything was good. And within 2 days, I became very sick, and my immune system broke down. So it was interesting. It was like HIV without the virus.
Yeah.
It was really my immune system completely collapsed. With a very rare disease and blah, blah, blah. And in the clinic, they were happy to have a case like me because they haven't had that for 30 years. They didn't know how to treat it. And I was at the ICU for 3 months. So I was really on the brink. It was really hardcore. My body was at fire. And during that 3 months, which was like a comatic dream, although I was awake, but it was like a heated dream. I always was struggling where to head. It was I was completely confronted with the unknown. If I wanted to live on, and I can recall this moment when it was in my hands there. If I would decide to go left, I would die. If I would go right, I would live on. And I was in front of that cross yard for 2 months. I couldn't make up my mind. Was it worthwhile going on or not? It was just a reporting on an observation, actually.
Right.
And that I recorded one night when the doctor on guard came in, a young guy, and he started to address me and said, we can't help you anymore. He was the youngest doctor. He was a beginner. But to my observations, that's not up to us here. You have to make up your mind, he said. Bluntly, right between my eyes, he told. And I was kind of...
Well, at least he was honest. He was recognizing the limit of his knowledge, right?
Absolutely. This was a kind of wake-up call, and 10 days later, I left the hospital. So it was really this tipping point where, it's in my hands. What about that, And that in parallel to that, not knowing, I was, even if I would go on, what to do, because going back was no idea, was no way, no possibility for me. And then I was struggling with that question. And one night I had this realization, and this was exactly that way, which was, I didn't know where it came from. I didn't know exactly what it meant, but there was this line in my mind that I wanted to get in the forefront of drug addiction. And because I always wondered why those beautiful human beings, these beautiful young people, what was their path to have them end in the late teens on the streets, whatever. I just didn't get the reason. And that with the blend of my Buddhist practice of the overcoming of suffering was a breakthrough moment for me. And then I was thinking, what in the forefront of suffering, the forefront of drug addiction, what would it mean? And then I said, it means family. But what is the key denominator of all families in our societies? And another night later, it was, this must be business. What is the most common denominator of a society? Everyone in our society is in one or the other way connected to business, to economy, to this. You have to make your living.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Everybody do that in one or the other way. So, this was the line but wow, it's business work. So my, now you can call it naive thinking, was taking care of good, healthy systems in organizations where thousands of people come in and are affected by it or not, or the opposite, means that they would go home in a different state of being. And because I always liked the idea of leverage. And I never saw myself as a psychotherapist sitting in my little office and receiving 8 clients a day, 5 days a week. This was not my thing. I always liked the idea of, wow, 10,000 is better than 5,000 to invest.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And this was my guiding question, actually, and this was the answer to that question. And then it was I didn't even feel prepared. How are you prepared to be a consultant? I don't know. I don't even know today, because this is, what does it mean to be a consultant exactly? But I could teach something, and then I was invited to work with young leaders at Mercedes-Benz in Germany and at Bosch.
Okay.
And all of a sudden I was there.
So can I interrupt you, if you allow me, Christian? At that time, were the core principles of this conscious consulting group that is now as it is, were they already there formulated, or they were like under the surface and waiting to be, let's say, really emerging? What was it? What was your approach at that time? Was it already this conscious approach to consulting or not?
I wouldn't have called it conscious approach by then, but I could definitely have called it spiritual approach.
Okay.
And it became, or actually I expanded what I was invited to do with these young leaders with the dimension of their self. Who are you? What about you? What about you?
Yeah.
What about you? Is this the real thing for you to do? Is this the role? Is this really suiting who you really are? Do you have an idea? Did you ever look inside and not in this tune in the common narrative of becoming an executive, and then you go this petty path of climbing the mountain seat, up.
Yeah, absolutely. And at that time, it was not so common to look into these questions, right, in the field of business, right? Now it is like, it seems like so evident, I mean, especially for us, but at that time it was not, right?
You even couldn't say coach. I think I was the first, I don't know, not important, but I think it was the first one to call work coaching, which is only for sports and then in the US. To coach somebody, because they all come and were educated in the knowing of it. Everybody knew everything, It was, you had to know everything. and but it was the beginning. And especially then, this is still today a tricky word in the Western cultures, is esoteric.
Yeah.
There is one label you definitely cannot have and don't want to have, is when you work in the field of business and consulting, is esoteric.
Yeah.
This is the killer phrase.
Yeah.
If you have that word, you're out of business.
Yeah, esoteric or mystical or spiritual or all these fuzzy kind of things. Absolutely.
But esoteric is still, and at that time it was unheard of. You just couldn't, you shouldn't be even near to that phrase, So you had to wrap it and rephrase this, but it was placing the virus.
Okay.
It was placing the virus already then, and which is actually anything we can do. We can seed. This is what we can do. We can seed and forget about the seeds. Create good conditions for the seedlings, and then trust. And this is still amazing, because I recently, a couple of years ago, I received a call from a CEO of an American corporation who called me after 25 years.
Wow.
After 25 years, he found out my number and said, Christian, can you talk? And he told me shortly he was part of one of my first junior executive programs with them the target to make them C-level ready in the early 90s. He said, it was so tough what we did, what you taught us and how you treated us. And I really feel bad for that. But it was so tough, but it was the only thing that made a difference in my life. And now I'm in deep shit and I need your help. 25 years later, he had the guts to call me. And this was beautiful to hear. I really feel terrible because I feel sorry. I was a young man then and thought it had to be tough too. But it was beautiful to see about the seeds. We just don't know. But still, we have to see it. If this is our call, we have to speak our truth. We have to share who we are.
Yeah. So that brings me, Christian, to another related question, which is, what kind of people come and would not consider this as something nowadays in your current practice? What kind of CEOs or organization come to you? Mm-hmm. Because I assume that it's not the generic thing. We will go to see the traditional consulting firms, and there are so many on the market, and they bring some added value. I am not here belittling them, but I guess there is a kind of special profile or something which motivates these people to come and see your organization or similar type of organization who have a different approach. So what is it?
Well, first of all, I think in the business market, there is a clear distinction today that consulting has become a part of the problem and not of the solution.
Okay.
The consulting industry, and you mentioned the big.
Yes.
Okay. This is my take and the take of many clients. They are part of the problem. And
it means what the people who come, the CEO who come, have been disappointed by the solution.
Many of them. If you are from a certain size of the organization on, you cannot miss out the big ones. Yeah, and there's a very classic approach to those. Mm-hmm. And not going deeper into that, but many are very unhappy with the outcomes. It's a very always still linear approach to something, and it is especially in the classical capitalistic philosophical paradigm.
Yeah, so short-term orientation and techno-fixed solution and so on, right?
It's all greed-based, privatize the revenue stream and distribute the costs, the social costs, and so on.
Right. Yeah, and disregard for the human, right? Yeah.
And there is this other part of consulting, I think, where this works differently, mainly smaller entities, individuals. Okay. But who comes today? First of all, our clients have changed. I think in my observation, our clients have changed. Or the landscape of the clients has changed. There now is a different breed on C-level in many organizations. So these are people like you and me. They live in a similar world than you and I do. The paycheck alone doesn't cover their life costs anymore. In terms of, there is this question, what about me here? It wasn't asked 20 years back.
Right.
They have kids who ask the same question. Hey, Dad, what are you doing between Monday and Friday and on Saturday? And how are you contributing to that, what we are confronted with as humanity?
Yeah.
This has an impact. And they are, in my observation, in a terrible position. They're completely sandwiched. We also relate to the C-level, board level CEOs as the most powerful in charge. Wow. What if this is a misunderstanding of the role? First of all, it's called chief executive. So they execute.
Execute the mandate of whom? Yeah, exactly.
Of the stock market, of this craziness of demands, yeah,
Right.
and having in an extremely volatile and complex environment, which we have often no clue of. It's markets have completely changed in the last 10, 15, 20 years, of course. This is a light speed acceleration, actually. And still in the role of, actually, if you take the mountain seed, you should be able to do it. You should know it, you know? How can one know? How can one know? And again, wisdom traditions, one of the core teaching in the Zen is, or the base of Zen is, disqualified not knowing, beginner's mind. What if I wouldn't know? Meaning, what if I not be limited by my conceptual mind in order to confront that, what I call reality, but to stay open and aware in the present moment. And it's unable for them to show any weaknesses. And then they have this bullfight in the arena and behind closed doors. And so to come back to your question, what is people who are suffering, people who do not weigh and want to weigh out, who can see but have no idea how to move on, and can see that the old path is a contribution to collectively either hitting the wall or socially. But it's recently there's a few, and I have to distinct what I do and what the company does, because I do not do large change programs anymore. I monitor them when we're invited to help them. But what my specific Christian work is, I function as a senior advisor to these people.
Okay.
To you, we have conversations. So they need a space to speak out, a safe space to where they don't have to look good, where they don't have to know it all, where they can be in the midst of their humanity and show up as a fully human being.
Yeah.
And it's this kind of, and without competition, being allowed to not to look.
But that brings me to two related questions, Christian, because the first is that do they have, let's say, the backing of the board or the shareholders or whoever they are executing for? This is one question. And or is it like you're just, in fact, here, now I'm speaking about your role, just as a kind of, you're just a chamber for them to do things, but it remains their personal kind of, let's say, way of venting their problems, but not maybe converting them into action. So where is the line here? Yeah.
Well, there isn't a line. It's a beginning. You drop the stone. And it's like dropping the stone in the pond and see where the ripples go. But usually it begins with a one-on-one. But of course, this is not this doesn't have the role of a psychotherapeutic meeting with your shrink or whatever. Just the opposite, actually. It's about clearing the mind in service of that role. How can you reinterpret your role as a CEO, for instance? Because there are also these patterns, and not only the patterns you have in your mind when you accept that role, but also the environment which pulls you into their expectations. This is how we do it here,
Okay.
And if you are in this hamster wheel, in this treadmill of an everyday executive role, you lose sight. You become part of the tumbling. And what often happens, especially in larger corporations, is that you disconnect happens between the board and boardroom members and the organization.
Yeah.
And you see this sometimes expressed in the architecture. You have this sea level 7 up floors, even on
absolutely.
days and whatever, and no regular human being would ever be allowed to enter the 7th floor. Weird stuff. But what really happens is, this is for me the major breakdown of an organization. If the core in old picture we would look at it as a pyramid, the top.
Right.
Top gets disconnected from the rest of the pyramid, from the body. This is what I call the major breakdown of an organization, because it really, and this is one of the key images I love to work with, looking at an organization, is what if this organization is fully like a body, like a real body, and looking at a healthy body, we see that every body cell is informed by the same DNA. It does know not by intellectual knowing, but there's this deep knowing of its function, of its contribution to the whole. And you don't have to explain every 50 billion cells in our body what it shall do and how it shall process whatever it does. There is this deep underlying knowing of it. And when you are with that image, this is an exact state of being what you want an organization to be, that the information stream arrives where it belongs, where it has to arrive, where it has the information to be put. It doesn't mean that every information has to go to the brains. By far not. We couldn't live our life as a human being if every information would hit our brain. It's an overlap. So we have our filters on various fields. But what we do is we need this body to sense in which environment am I? How is the state of being of my left arm compared to the rest of the body, without having it to explain, and therefore to make the appropriate moves. Even when you change environment, is it cold, is it hot, is it wet, is it dry? And this is similar to an organization. How do markets change? And we often have it like sales claims, the client belongs to us,
Yeah, true.
The floor doesn't belong to the feet. It's completely stupid and irrelevant if you would have that argument with our body, the feet claiming, oh, the body is mine, the floor is mine, not yours, rest of the body. So, and to come to that awakening of, wow, this is a way I could look at my body organization and start to relate. I have to recultivate a different tool set, a different aspect of me being in that seat, me claiming that seat. And then all of a sudden, many of the techniques or teaching from classical business schools or from classical management narratives are outdated. They don't make sense. Why would they?
Absolutely. So, what would be the kind of practices? I'm looking at the time, so I'm becoming a little bit conscious. Just briefly, what kind of maybe one or two practices which will mark the clear distinction and which still help your, let's say, the CEO who come to see you, to be able to be in that different space where they are connecting to this living entity, which is an organization, like a living body, as you said. Yeah.
Well, first of all, on the individual level, it's the acknowledgement of suffering.
Okay.
Of suffering in various forms. Is not always dramatic, but it's of this permanent doubts, this am I the right, what to do, go left, go right, as if there would be a right out there. to relieve them from these conceptual ideas of I'm missing out something. Yeah, of course, we're missing most of it out. This is the nature of being human. But I recall a client where we were working with the boardroom, four members of the boardroom, and they had, when they addressed us, they had done a deep assessment of the situation. A very successful global market leader in jewelry, whatever, and they've identified 118 problems out of interviews with their employees, leading employees. And they called it the, problem house or whatever. The first information we got, wow, we have no idea how we can help you. Well, we know we can help, but we don't know what that means. So we're always curious what's behind that first layer of, what is the underlying pattern of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then, going beyond this obviously. Yeah.
Actually, an important thing, my intention always is to work on the DNA of an organization. This is where we have, and this is the beauty of the job, actually, that we have usually when we do our job good, we have access to the DNA of an organization, which hardly anyone is allowed to address. This is the responsibility we actually have, which I see as one of the dignities of our job, of what we have to be careful about. So when we got invited to join them, and we started with an offsite with the four of them for 2 days. Said, okay, this is 4 days, 2 days, and then you work with the organization. Not us, because they have the problem. The organization out there has the problem, of course. And I think on day 2, is always in kind of conversation style in various forms. Julia asked the question, because their problem was, the overlining theme was empowerment. 10 years back, this was a very strong phrase, how to empower.
Okay. I see. Yeah.
And out of the blue, Julia asked them, what does empower you? And what does disempower you? What disempowers you? Very blunt, very simple. And this was like you could all of a sudden you could listen to the penny drop. It was like a crack in their mind. And before they kind of liked each other and they were kind of close, but it was like the first one started bursting out in tears. 50-year-old guys,
Wow.
Senior in bold jimmies. Wow, I said, I cannot stand our tension in the boardroom any longer. And also, and you, and all of a sudden, and over here the same. And if we do not survive, if we don't come out with a better solution this time, I will leave, the third one said, and I'm out of here. I don't want to sacrifice my life here anymore. It was like bomb, 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 And so they started to talk about themselves, which was taboo. Because this is taboo usually in boardrooms. Who am I? The role carrier. They want to really feed it with his or her energy, with his life, his spirituality.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful, Christian.
Christian, he moved on, and then it was easy. And then they said, no, we need more time in the group of 4. It took them 1 year. 1 year. They took time for themselves before they enrolled the organization. Instead of 1-2 days. So they just had the guts to say, we need more time. And this was beautiful. And it became really the signature project of my life, I would say, because it really became a body of an organization, a living body of an organization. Without hierarchies in place, but no lead to be boss or anything like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Prosperous.
It's very beautiful because it says a lot about the tendency that we have to okay, you have 3 months to diagnose this and give me and fix the problem. And then here it is totally not the approach. We are honoring the time and to take place, this changing, this breakthrough or crack, as you say, to happen. And then this conversion into the organization, that itself take its own time. So it's a totally different approach. And just love this. Yeah.
Actually, this is actually one of the key. This was a family-owned global organization. So this was the advantage of that, because on the stock market, this is kind of hardly possible, because they have different timelines and different.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, Christian, I'm looking at the time, and I'm very sorry that we have to keep it temporarily. I'm sure we'll have more conversations. What would be your final word for some of our people who are listening to you and this conversation? If they are like this, in a position where they would like to do something and they would like to maybe change the approach, and they have some kind of, let's say, insight that maybe I can try or experiment a different way of doing things, what would you tell them? What would be your, let's say, brief final word on that?
In Buddhism, we say it's a precious opportunity to be born as a human being. Very rare, precious opportunity to be born as a human being. And when you then find yourself in this rare finding, in a role where you are caretaker of the life of many others and of the prosperity of many others, then take it as a precious gift. And be aware of that it is a precious gift. It's not about you. You're the humble servant to that. But when you are in charge, take it fully. Don't hold back. Invest everything. Because this is, I think, where somebody said, business is one of the best arenas to practice your enlightenment.
Yeah.
To wake up. And waking up is never about us. Waking up is always waking up to the whole. And this French philosopher, Teilhard de Chardin, this Catholic priest, said it beautifully. We are not human beings having a spiritual experience, but spiritual beings having a human experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just imagine. It was all around. Yeah. And then it's a blessing. And then we have become creators. And be joyful. Reach out to you, to us, to all of us. There are many around, and
wonderful. I mean, this is really like so wise and so. I mean, the wisdom of the ancient and from any kind of tradition is just like amazing. And what I am really, I thank you for accepting to be my guest today and bringing back this element to where we don't think it belongs, but it can belong. And what you are trying to show us it is a very strong, let's say, possibility and rewarding. As well for everyone.
You have these incredible conditions in your cultural tradition, still so close. And then now is this opening, thriving giant. Blend those, take the resource, take the refuge in that. And not only the temple is in the boardroom. Make it not by lighting a candle, but behaving or be aware of your divine nature.
Absolutely. Wonderful. So thanks a lot, Christian, again. And of course, we stay in touch and more to come to explore further the beauty and the importance of wisdom or consciousness or bringing whatever you call it, becoming more real and becoming a contributor in this world. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm really grateful.
You were listening to Sapience, special podcast series by SPJIMR Institute of Management and Research, Mumbai. Brought to you by SPJIMR Center for Wisdom and Leadership, produced by Vinita Dwivedi and the communications team.